Empires don't usually die the way movies show it. They don't fall in one dramatic night. They don't always lose in one final battle. Most empires don't collapse. They fade, they fracture, and then one day, they simply stop working. Not because an enemy stormed the gates, but because the system behind the gates ran out of strength. History is full of ruins that once looked permanent, stones that were meant to last forever, cities that believed they were untouchable, flags that were supposed to fly for 1,000 years, and yet, they're gone. The strange thing is, when an empire is dying, people inside it rarely notice. Life still looks normal. The lights still work. The currency still moves. The headlines still argue about politics and celebrities and scandals. Collapse doesn't arrive with an explosion. It arrives with exhaustion. An empire doesn't die when soldiers lose wars. It dies when it can no longer carry its own weight, when promises multiply faster than resources, when power spreads wider than the economy beneath it, when the empire keeps expanding, but the foundation keeps thinning. Now here's the unsettling question. What if the most powerful country in human history isn't being defeated? What if it's being drained? What if it isn't collapsing outward, but bleeding inward? Not with fire and invasion, but with quiet failures stacking on top of each other. Debt that never shrinks, institutions that no longer inspire trust, work that no longer builds wealth, leaders who seem disconnected from consequences. Not all at once, not overnight, but just enough, every year, to make next year worse than the last. This is how empires actually die, not from a single disaster, but from thousands of small decisions that all point in the same direction. Overspending that feels manageable until it isn't. Printing money that feels harmless until it isn't. Outsourcing everything that once made you strong until nothing is left to hold you up. And the most dangerous moment in an empire's life is the moment when people still believe everything is fine. Because when things finally break, they don't break slowly. They break all at once. Civilizations don't announce their end. They pretend it will never happen. They distract themselves with growth reports, with stock charts, with political theater. And meanwhile, beneath the surface, the structure creaks, the pressure builds, the cracks spread wider every year. Every empire that collapsed thought it was different. Every empire believed the rules did not apply to them. Every empire assumed history had ended, with them on top, and every single one was wrong. Tonight, we're not going to talk about ancient battles. We're not going to romanticize fallen kings. We're going to talk about something far more uncomfortable. The systems that kill great nations from the inside, the financial pressure points, the political failure loops, the economic lies that slowly hollow out even the strongest empires. Because the most dangerous enemy an empire ever faces is not another army, it's reality. And reality always collects. It doesn't forgive, it doesn't forget, and it never resets the debt. So the question isn't, can any empire collapse? The question is, how long can one survive while pretending it won't? When people imagine the fall of a nation, they imagine chaos. They imagine tanks in the streets, explosions in the capital, crowds fleeing, a president disappearing into exile. That's what collapse looks like in movies. But in real life, that's almost never how it happens. Nations don't usually die in a moment of violence. They die in long periods of silence. There is no single day when everything breaks. There is no clear announcement, no dramatic final scene. What happens instead is slower and far more dangerous. A nation collapses when it can no longer sustain itself. Not when the capital falls. Not when the flag is torn down, but when its systems quietly stop working, when the economy stops creating value, when money stops meaning something, when trust stops holding society together. A country can survive losing a battle. It can survive losing territory. What it cannot survive is losing belief. Because money is not just paper, it's confidence. Laws are not just words, they're legitimacy. Borders are not just lines on a map, they're agreements that people will defend something larger than themselves. And when those agreements fracture, physical collapse always follows. First, the system stops feeding itself. Factories slow down, productivity falls. Innovation dries up, the nation no longer builds. It only borrows. It no longer creates. It only consumes. And for a while, It still looks like success. Imports fill the shelves. Stock markets climb. Screens glow with data that suggests everything is fine. But underneath, the engine is missing parts. The economy becomes a performance, a recycled illusion of strength. And then something even more dangerous happens. The money begins to lie. Not loudly, not obviously, just quietly, year after year. Prices creep up. Savings erode. Work feels heavier. The future feels shorter. People don't always know exactly why, but they know something is wrong. They stop believing official numbers. They stop trusting institutions. They stop expecting tomorrow to be better than today. And when that happens, the strongest leave first. Not physically at first, mentally. They disengage. They stop investing. They stop building. Then eventually, they leave for real. A nation can survive poverty. It cannot survive abandonment. Because when the builders exit, only consumers remain. When the innovators leave, only managers remain. When the dreamers disappear, only caretakers of decay remain. This is why history shows something strange. Empires don't look weak before they fall. They look distracted. They don't look defeated. They look busy. Arguing, spinning, pretending, hosting endless debates about symptoms while ignoring the disease. And the disease is not invasion. It's internal failure. A nation doesn't die when its city is captured. A nation dies when it stops producing and starts pretending. Pretending that debt is growth. Pretending that printing builds wealth. Pretending that performance is power. Because eventually, the math catches up. It always does. And when it does, no army can stop it. No speech can reverse it. No propaganda can outrun it. The collapse doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives on a morning that looks like any other. Empires don't collapse from bad luck. They collapse from bad systems, not mistakes, not accidents, failures. Designed into the structure, quiet at first, invisible from the outside, but deadly from within. Across centuries, across continents, across ideologies, every fallen superpower has suffered from the same three fractures, not myths, mechanisms. Let's start with the first. Overreach when power outruns wealth. There is a moment in every empire's life when its influence grows faster than its economy, when ambition expands faster than production, when control stretches further than support. That moment is invisible, but it's fatal. Power feels intoxicating, territories expand, allies multiply, responsibilities pile up, and everything still looks impressive. From the outside, it looks like strength. From the inside, it feels like pressure. Every new obligation needs funding. Every border needs personnel. Every promise needs enforcement. And eventually, the system becomes a machine that demands more energy than it can generate. Empire leaders never feel overextended. They feel necessary. Necessary to intervene. Necessary to stabilize. Necessary to respond. So they stretch again, and again, and again, until strength becomes burden. Until expansion becomes maintenance. Until power becomes logistics. This is the hidden danger of scale. Large systems don't break by crashing. They break by grinding. One supply route, too many. One obligation too far. One crisis too much. And then something subtle happens. Resources meant to build the future are spent preserving the past. Innovation slows. Productivity stalls. Risk disappears. Everything exists to hold the system together, not to move it forward. That's how a superpower becomes a caretaker of its own exhaustion. Money illusion. When numbers replace reality, the second fracture is harder to see because it hides behind statistics. A nation doesn't collapse when money disappears. It collapses when money stops telling the truth. When currency stops representing value and starts representing denial. Spending feels painless at first. Credit replaces discipline. Printing replaces productivity. Accounting replaces accountability. The numbers still go up. Markets rise. Budgets expand. Welfare systems grow. Military systems grow. Everything grows, except what actually pays for it. Real economy doesn't move with spreadsheets. It moves with labor, with skills, with factories, with energy, with engineering. You cannot print food. You cannot print steel. You cannot print an educated workforce, but you can pretend. And pretension lasts longer than anyone expects, until it doesn't. At first, people feel it as inconvenience, then as pressure, then as panic. Savings vanish quietly. Prices climb stubbornly. Work becomes heavier. And then comes the strangest part. The illusion outlives the truth. Screens still glow. Banks still operate. Money still moves. But it becomes hollow. Purchasing power evaporates. And when citizens stop trusting money, they don't just lose currency, they lose time. They lose future. Because savings are time stored. When time dissolves, so does loyalty. And without loyalty, no system survives. Elite detachment when leaders escape consequences. The third fracture is the most dangerous, because it feels invisible until it's irreversible. This is what happens when leadership no longer experiences the outcomes of their own decisions. When those at the top insulate themselves from inflation, from crime, from instability, from economic pain. When policies hurt the poor first and protect the powerful last. When leaders fail, but never feel it, and citizens pay, but never escape. This is the point where nations rot internally, because accountability is the glue of civilization. When leaders are tied to consequences, they choose carefully. When they're not, they gamble recklessly. Entire systems are destroyed, not by evil, but by comfort. Detached leadership produces blind governance. Blind governance produces irreversible decay. Because no system can survive leadership that doesn't live inside its own reality. Once the ruling class floats above consequences, collapse becomes inevitable, not politically, psychologically. Trust ceases, buy-in disappears, and people withdraw from the idea of the nation itself, not through rebellion, through retreat, through apathy, through silence, through walking away. How these three destroy everything. Here's the nightmare. These three failures don't act alone. They feed each other. Overextension stresses the economy. Economic stress invites money illusion. Money illusion protects elites. Elite protection accelerates overreach. And the loop tightens. Like a ratchet, one direction only. No alarm sound. No emergency lights flash. The system simply loses its ability to correct itself. Mistakes no longer shrink. They compound. Bad decisions stop being reversed. They accumulate. Until the system reaches a point where no single reform can save it, only transformation could, and transformation never happens. Without pain, the most dangerous moment, empires don't collapse. When they are obviously broken, they collapse. When they still look powerful. When confidence is loud and truth is quiet. When the numbers look strong, but the reality feels wrong, that's when collapse becomes unstoppable. Not because enemies attack, but because the system no longer knows how to heal itself. There is a modern superpower today, showing all three fractures at once. Not in secret, not behind closed doors, in full view of the world. But here's the strange thing. Nothing looks like collapse. Airports are full, phones are fast, cities are loud, money still moves. On the surface, everything appears alive. But strength isn't measured by movement. It's measured by what sustains the movement. And underneath the motion, something is wearing thin. Let's start with the first fracture, the debt engine. In this superpower, debt no longer funds emergencies. It funds normal life. Deficits are no longer exceptions. They are routine. Borrowing is not a choice. It is policy. Year after year, spending grows faster than production. Government obligations expand, while the real economy struggles to keep up. And here's the dangerous part. The debt does not scare anyone. Not politicians, not markets, not institutions. It has become invisible, just another number, added to a screen. But debt behaves like gravity. It bends the future silently. Every new dollar borrowed is a promise made to someone who isn't born yet, and eventually, the weight becomes unbearable. Not because the money disappears, but because it becomes trapped, servicing the past. When interest overwhelms investment, a nation stops building tomorrow. To pay for yesterday, the printing response. When pressure rises, leaders reach for relief, and the fastest relief is always money creation. On paper, it looks harmless. New programs appear, new aid flows, New promises are printed, the system stays upright for a while, but currency, like trust, wears thin with use, slowly, daily, invisible to headlines, but obvious at the grocery store. Here, prices don't explode, they erode. Savings melt quietly, wages fall behind silently. People work harder, but feel poorer. And the strangest thing happens, no one can point to. A single wrong decision. Just 1,000 small ones, stacked together. Money still exists, but its meaning weakens. Not in theory, in daily life. And when currency loses credibility, a society loses confidence. The hollowed base. Now comes the third fracture. Production itself begins to drift away, not in one wave. In countless small moves, factories relocate, supply chains stretch, essential industries scatter. Everything becomes cheaper somewhere else. Until one day, nothing essential is made at home. Not energy, not medicine, not machines, not even parts for defense. Design may remain, finance may flourish, but creation is outsourced and dependence grows. The nation becomes a consumer of the world instead of its builder. And consumption cannot replace production. It feels good. It looks good, but it builds nothing underneath. A strong economy makes things. A weak one only buys them. The social unraveling. And then, the final fracture begins to show. Not in numbers, not on charts. In people. Trust thins. The future shortens. Communities fragment. Everything becomes political, even survival. Citizens no longer feel inside a nation. They feel trapped inside a system, one that works for everyone else, except them. Institutions lose respect. Media loses credibility. Leadership loses protection. Everyone is shouting. No one is listening. This is not rebellion. This is withdrawal. A slow emotional exit from the idea of us. And when us disappears, no economy can hold. No military can substitute. No currency can replace it. Because nations are not held together by laws. They are held together by belief. And belief is fading, putting the fractures together. Here's what makes this moment different. All three fractures are happening at the same time. Debt without fear, money without meaning, production without roots, and a society that no longer feels whole. No single collapse, no single explosion, just a system, quietly losing coherence. This superpower still looks dominant, still looks unbreakable, still feels permanent. But permanence is always the illusion, right before it vanishes. History has already written this story, in different languages, in different centuries, with different flags, but always with the same ending. Not because collapse is destiny, but because ignoring reality is. History never announces the end. It offers a choice. Every collapsing civilization reaches a moment when decay is no longer theoretical. It becomes personal. This is that moment. Not because disaster has already happened, but because the window to prevent it is closing. And here's the truth no empire wants to hear. There are only two paths. Once decline becomes visible. Not 5, not 10. 2. Path 1. Drift. This is the easier path, the quieter one, the one that requires no courage, no honesty, no sacrifice. It's the path of continuation, of pretending the system will fix itself, of hoping tomorrow will absorb the damage from today. Leadership avoids hard decisions. Institutions defend outdated structures. Citizens adapt instead of demanding. Debt grows quietly. Currency weakens slowly. Production fades politely, until one day, it doesn't. Then panic replaces denial. Emergency replaces planning. Control replaces consent. And collapse arrives. Not like thunder, but like suffocation. Slow, unforgiving, invisible, until it's too late. History does not mark this moment as tragedy. It calls it neglect. Path 2. Reform. The second path is smaller, narrower, harder, and it begins with pain. Because real reform always hurts first. There is no gentle way to undo decades of excess. There is no painless way to face reality, but there is a way forward. It starts with debt, not denial, not excuses, not cosmetic fixes, but discipline. Spending must reflect reality, not ambition, not propaganda. Debt is not an accounting problem. It is a moral one. It is the act of taking from the future to survive the present, and no civilization lasts on borrowed time. Then comes rebuilding, not slogans, not speeches, production, markets, skill, industry, energy. A strong nation does not speculate. It manufactures, it invents, it builds, not narratives. Infrastructure, not illusions. Supply chains. A nation that cannot produce is a nation waiting to fall. Then comes honesty in money. Currency must represent reality, not rescue. Printing replaces nothing. Hiding replaces trust. A nation that lies through its currency will eventually speak the truth through crisis. And finally, leadership. Not personalities, not politics, but accountability. A nation heals when consequences return to power, when decision-makers live under the same costs as those who obey. This is the hardest reform of all, because elites seldom surrender comfort voluntarily. But history shows one thing clearly: a system does not change until the people who benefit from it are forced to. The last truth: empires do not fail because solutions do not exist. They fail because they refuse to use them until it's too late. Reform feels impossible. Right before collapse makes it irrelevant. History is not cruel. It is consistent. It does not punish nations. It reveals them. And then it records the result. The end is never written in advance. Not for any country, not for any century, not for this one. But consequences always arrive on schedule. Slowly at first, then all at once. So this moment, right now, is not a sentence. It is a test of courage, of restraint, of honesty. History never guarantees collapse, but it always guarantees consequences. And in the end, every civilization simply chooses which one it wants.